The ACT. English, 5 passages, 75 questions, only 45 minutes. You gotta move. So, we open our test booklet. We have a question like this. We immediately start in. No change. I grew up with buckets, shovels, and nets waiting by the back door. Hip waders hanging in the closet, etc. Sounds okay. B. I grew up with buckets, shovels, and nets waiting by the back door. Hip waders hanging in the closet. That sounds okay too. C. I grew up with buckets, shovels, and nets waiting by the back door. Hip waders hanging in the closet. My goodness, that sounds all right also. Let's try D. I grew up with buckets, shovels, and nets waiting by the back door. Hip waders hanging in the closet. Well, they all sound the same. Why is that? First, let's notice how we read this passage. Our eyes dart back and forth between the question and what we're reading and the answer. As we dart back and forth, it's easy to lose our place. What exactly are we reading? Also, notice that I didn't read any of the punctuation very well because there's commas all over the place. Commas change the meaning of the passage. This leads to the first rule of reading. The problem, because the question's on the left, the answer's on the right, our eyes are always bouncing back and forth. As they bounce back and forth, we lose our place. The solution. Cover the entire question with the fingers of your left hand and place the fingers of your right hand under the choice you're reading, so you make sure that you're only focused on the selection of the choice that you're looking at. But the second rule regards punctuation. As you listen to me read those 4 choices, they sounded identical. I blasted right through them. Likely you did too. And in doing so, we don't even see the differences because we're not reading exactly what's there. The solution, read punctuation with dramatic, exaggerated, unbelievable pause, huge pause. And you'll see how quickly the answer is probably wrong. Let's try a couple. Let's suppose that I was looking at question 1. I want to remove that if I'm reading B, C, or D. I don't want my eyes to even look at those words or the punctuation mark. So I'm going to place my fingers of my left hand over that entirely. You have to practice it. If I was reading selection B, I want to put the fingers of my right hand underneath B. I want my eyes to only focus on selection B. Now, here's how I would read this. I grew up with buckets, shovels, and nets waiting by the back door. Hip waders hanging in the closet. So obviously wrong because of the long, exaggerated pause after waiting. I grew up with buckets, shovels, and nets waiting by the back door. Oh, so obviously wrong. And it jumps right out at us because we've isolated the question, the answer, a dramatic pause in reading punctuation. Let's try D. I grew up with buckets, shovels, and nets waiting by the back door, hip waders hanging in the closet. That time I blasted right through. I didn't let my mind pause as it would naturally do because there was no comma there. I grew up with buckets, shovels, and nets waiting by the back door, hip waders hanging in the closet. There's no comma. Don't even think about pausing. Read exactly what is on the paper. And the answers, right or wrong, jump right out at you. Now, there are many questions like this, short, and the grammar of the question is what we're focused on. And along comes a question like question 4. Which choice would most effectively introduce the rest of this paragraph? Well, these are hard because up to this point we've been focused on the proper grammar of the question. In doing so, we haven't really paid attention to what the passage is even about. So a question like this is not only hard because it's long, it's hard because we have no idea what the story is about. Skip it. Skip all long questions. There's lots of easy questions, short answers that we can get right away. As important, when we get done with the short questions, we'll come back through. Let me reread it this way. As we read the short questions, we're focusing on the grammar of the question. We aren't even following the story. So along comes a question, a long question, asking something like, what's a good transition between this paragraph and the next? We don't have a clue. Why? Because we're not even following the story. It's hard to say what constitutes a good transition when you don't know the story. The solution, therefore, skip all these long questions. They're time consumers. As you saw, there's 75 questions, 45 minutes, and there's 50 to 55 very short questions. Get those first. Don't waste time trying to figure out what constitutes good transition or understanding the long questions. But as we come back to check if we've done these short questions correctly, we'll read the story with our answers in place. And as you do this, you'll see that you'll have a great idea of what the story is about. And suddenly these long questions are very answerable. Only at that point do you answer the long questions. So there are 3 fundamental rules of reading and problem solving in the English section. 1, isolate the question and answer with your left and right hand, the fingers of your left hand and right hand. 2, read punctuation with dramatic, exaggerated, unbelievably long pauses. And 3, skip long questions. And as you come back through to check your work, only then answer the long questions. You'll notice up to this point we haven't even talked about apostrophes, pronoun use, or technically any English or appropriate grammatical techniques. We focused on reading appropriately, the methods, and that's going to take us a long way.